And I'm back. Part 2, I guess. I guess.
Life is like a hydra head. And I know that the Greek myth is you have to cut it off at the neck. But cutting off the life on Earth at the neck, as I tried to point out, and I'm doing not a good job of it because I don't have time.
Yeah, there's always an excuse. But whatever. Yeah, you think that you know that it's scientifically impossible to wipe out the fragile ecosystem. Yeah, sorry. It's just I don't. Your imagination can somehow ponder overcoming the speed of light dilemma for universal travel, and yet that's not a burden to you. But yeah, finding a way to disrupt the balance, the delicate balance that keeps matter in the complex form of a living being. Nah, that's, well, anyway. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you can't make the argument. That's why you're not making the argument.
Is not going to fix the problem for a lot
yes,
of reasons.
Yes, it is.
So, if we could disentangle the brutality and the cruelty...
Whatever. So you want to just change the subject, that's fine. Ugh, video's gone. I hit the pause button and the video disappears. Thanks, YouTube. I hit the pause button. I hit the pause button. Anyway. So we were somewhere around the 7-something, I think.
Because, as you pointed out, Amanda, life is like a hydra head.
We already did that.
And I know that the Greek myth is you have to cut it off at the neck. But cutting off the life on Earth at the neck, as I tried to point out, and I'm doing not a good job of it because I don't have time, is not going to fix the problem for a lot of reasons. So if we could disentangle the brutality and the cruelty as much as we humanly can as problem-solving creatures, doesn't that make more sense than saying we need to get a way to try to eradicate?
Okay, well look, this making more sense thing, right? No one's opposed to those efforts, but again, where's the example of it in all of human history? And I'm just saying, if you can get people to a point where they're this mature, when they're this grown up, you're not going to need Christmas anymore. I mean, that's that's the true implication of the argument. Is once you become unselfish and unmotivated by all this cardinal, this completely personal ambition crap, the game, you'll see that the game doesn't need to exist. It'll be quite obvious that the only thing generating energy for the game is the same stupidity that's responsible for the bigotry and the brutality and the theft and the racketeering and the scheming and the conniving and all the other nonsense that exists. All that stuff only exists because of our incessant need. And once you have a perspective that allows you to see what the game is made out of, why the game is being played, you won't need to play the game anymore. So if you want to elevate human consciousness to the position where it understands the evils of selfishness and brutality and taking and extravagance and lack of utilitarian reason and lack of appreciation for suffering and the obligation to do something about it, once you have people at that point, I'm just saying, I'm going to win. You've already you've already created the world that is going to be completely conducive to going the one tiny step further and saying, well, wouldn't it just be simpler to turn off the valve of need?
Eradicate all life on Earth. It's another question, so you can answer it or not.
Well, again, it's been answered repeatedly and over again, so let's not pretend who hasn't made a ton of videos advocating for more humane social policies and whatnot. So this again is kind of a red herring or something. It's kind of a slimy fish is what it is. It's kind of just hitting people with a slimy fish as if they haven't made those arguments. It has nothing to do with this philosophical argument. that ultimately it's even better if you just quit playing a dumb game.
I mean, suffering and cruelty, they matter to me. I'm not sure if they matter generally to the world as much, and probably not. But there are things happening that make me optimistic. For example, and this is something I wouldn't personally eat, but they've devised artificial...
Right, so artificial flesh is somehow solves the problem of suffering on planet Earth. Again, I just find this totally unrealistic. I just totally a lack of recognition. Sorry, you just can't get away with this. Vegetarianism is symbolic. It's a symbolic gesture. Okay, it's like saying, it's like standing at on the battlefield or something and saying, "I will not cross the line," or "I will," you're being defiant. But the war goes on. The battle, blah blah blah. It's a statement. I don't know. So there's probably a better example, but it's just a recognition of your defiance. That you're not going to willfully and personally participate. Okay, because you can control this little bit around you. You'll control the little bit around you. But that little tiny bit of control, let us not pretend that this is a solution and something to be hopeful about. Okay, well anyway, and this idea of growing flesh, it's not going to work. It's going to be more expensive, and what are they going to do? Grow fat into it also? They're going to make it deliberately unhealthy? Whatever.
Beef, and the cells from living cows who could be allowed to stay alive could be taken, and beef and leather created from those cells. If that happened, then factory farming would become a thing of the past, because it wouldn't be profitable anymore to torture animals and put them into small spaces. That's just one example of unentangling life from brutality and from cruelty.
Yeah, and it's a silly example. I mean, in the sense that the whole attachment to beef is so conditional, circumstantial. It's not a good source of food. It's not healthy. It's not a million different things. And it's only because people have made it a habit. And so, yeah, those habits should be able to... to sit there and not be fairly unoptimistic that people can't even break those habits in spite of the huge amount of food choices they now have is startling. It should be stunningly... You should be just totally recognizing the preposterous failure that people are still incapable. But that it's not about being capable. It's just not giving a damn.
And it's not because animal rights people have made a big deal out of it. I feel like it's important to care about animals. But in this case, it's the profit motive. And to me, that makes more sense than saying we just have to throw in the towel and we have to try to get rid of all life. Could we just try to disentangle brutality and cruelty as much?
Well, you're not doing any of that. Again, you're fixing a tiny, 0.001% of the suffering on this planet, and then saying that's good enough. And of course, I find that laughable as a solution to the problem. You're not offering a solution. That's like saying there's 10 million slaves, and you're gonna free by lottery 7 of them. There, problem solved. Aren't we all satisfied now? 7 of them are going to be free every year. Isn't that good enough? No, it's not. Sorry. No, that's not good enough.
As much as we can, in lieu of just, getting rid of all life and then blowing up the rock. You made the point that we're shitting out sentience. That's a quote from you. But
yeah, well, and it's a perfectly accurate one, right? Because people are giving it that much thought. They're having kids as if it was just a ritualistic, excrement. And that's about as much thought as they're giving it.
the thing is that the same question applies. Then, what if sentience and brutality and cruelty are not necessarily entwined?
Well, what if? You know, based on what? Again, what example? There's no examples in nature. There's no examples in human history. And yet you're pretending that there's some good game to play that everybody's going to want to play and everybody's going to migrate to, some sort of benevolent game that doesn't have something to do with egos and selfishness. And I'm just like, okay, go ahead and show me a picture of this world. What again, they never describe heaven. Why? Yeah, because they can't describe it, because it's just going to come out looking like something disgustingly hedonistic, and that we all know that that's going to wear off too. You know, so what do you're not offering anything. You're not explaining what this future looks like.
If they're not necessarily entwined, then shouldn't we be trying to disentangle them? If we can't literally cut off the hydra at the head. And even if I could, I wouldn't, because
okay, well, the more important question then is, would you be responsible for it then? So if there was a green button that started it all 4 billion years ago, and you could be sitting right there, and you can hit the damn button, you're telling me you're going to hit the button. You're saying the price is adequate, sufficient, it's perfectly justifiable, because silly humans someday will think it's all fucking spectacular. You would impose all that suffering. For what? So you could perceive of yourself so highly that you deserve to be shot into space to colonize other planets. It's really how you view things. And you're telling me that's a logical perception, not something built out of your ego. That's what the logic says. This logic just screams that this wonderful human must be preserved, and he must be planted on other planets. He has such admirable and wonderful, charming attributes.
The difference between hoping, and I know hope, people have said, oh, hope is the wrong word to use, but I am hoping, not in the biblical sense, not in any religious sense.
Yeah, you're hoping on other people's, on their dime. So yeah, that's really cool. I mean, you're already here, so yeah, you're going to play out your marble. But the issue is does somebody else have a right to restart you in Indonesia? You want to wake up there? I sure as hell don't. You want to wake up a wombat or something? I don't.
But I'm hoping that we can become smart and humane and caring. That's what I'm hoping. And
yeah, again, if smart is going to mean that you don't recognize 99% of a problem and think you cured it with a 1.001% solution, well, that's not going to be my definition of smart. If smart is you can't figure out that, oh, it's a cycle of need, and all you have to do is break the cycle of need, and this need cycle stops. That is just a cycle. You're telling me that smart's not going to recognize that your feeding is entirely built on a false premise that the need needs to exist, which it doesn't. The false premise that somehow if the earthlings don't exist, they're going to want to exist. No, they're not.
as I pointed out, Amanda, she went on and on about how she didn't like me and all that stuff. If we went to a pub, you know, my local here in England or someplace close to you, and we sat down and we talked, I think, you know, it wouldn't be so antagonistic. It wouldn't be so us and them. Maybe we could talk about things and get a better grip on what we're actually dealing with and whether life and sentience are necessarily entwined with cruelty, suffering, and brutality. Sorry this was so long. I really didn't have time to do it.
Yeah, I just don't know how you can include otherwise. The only place your only place those things exist is through creating living things. You can't have brutality till you create a victim. and you're just saying, you're not talking about how you're going to not create victims. You're not talking about how you're going to create a fair game, or a game where deserve has everything to do with it, or a game where you can actually apply consent as a rational process. So how can you fix this game? Well, you can't fix this game. Again, you're presuming that something smart is going to not figure out that it's being used as fodder for a silly molecule replication engine. That the needs are all contrived and full of bullshit, and that you just sit there and satisfy them so you can eventually just die with them. For what purpose? There's no game without the need. It completely is fueled by some concept of a deprivation that does not need to exist. Shit. It's not complicated.
Sorry, I look like shit.
Whatever.
But you guys take care of yourselves.
Blah,
Bye-bye.
blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Alright, so she's also done another video talking about Philosophy Today, or whatever the hell it's called. Some magazine asked the question, what is life? Yeah, it's a replicating molecule. 4 billion years of evolution that substantially entails just a gladiator war to win a contrived war for which you will ultimately taste defeat. No one escapes defeat, spiritual or physical. Yeah, because silly people say keep doing it. No other reason. Alright, Verwell Films like to comment on one of my videos. Good point about the comment I made in the video. Yeah, I'm no way meant for it to sound like we should somehow abdicate responsibility from explaining our position. That's I more meant was that we shouldn't be apologetic about it. But yeah, it came out badly. I agree. It didn't come out badly. It really, it didn't really. I mean, I was just making the point that we're sort of stuck because of this. The practicalities of the world don't provide a fair fight. Even in philosophical arguments, there's no fair fight. And the fact that you come to an argument from the minority standing is going to require that you produce more. So anyway, there's the tool work. There's Amanda's video up there, and there's some response video by this stupid Carla Puke, bag of puke. Let's see what she posted, just for curiosity's sake. Fucking religious kook, as far as I'm concerned. Auto-tuned, wasn't that special. Yeah, what a brilliant response video. This is why response videos aren't worth it.
Tonight, with a greater readiness, let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in the...
Oh no, like this has something to do with the subject. Sorry, fail. Do 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 do. I certainly know that there was a lot of hypocrisy in Martin Luther King. Anyway, so what else can I fiddle with while I'm here? Is there any print? I don't think there's any print, so I'll cut it short. I'll cut you a break. It'll only be 30 minutes instead of 40. Yay! Do hate to leave memory unused, though. Well, it's only 20 minutes. Yeah, we'll get to 20 anyway. The computer's running a little slow. I guess I'm overtaxing it somehow. So yeah, there's what is life. That doesn't mean much to me. Blah blah blah. Nothing here. Hoftily Day guy made some video about logic. It's incredibly boring, but there might be something useful in it. Yeah, I mean, you really can't talk about ethics or any subject. You really have to start with premises, and you know, you can't have a rationally founded argument if you don't agree on what the value is of the pieces in the game. I mean, you have to ultimately agree. If you're going to play Monopoly, you have to ultimately agree that money and property has value. If you're not agreeing on that premise, you're not going to be playing the same game. It wouldn't make any sense if you think, yeah, the thing to do is we're trying to see how many times we go to jail. So you sort of have to agree on what the fundamental commodities are before you can have a conversation about ethics, right? I mean, it just makes sense. So, I mean, you have to agree on some premises. And saying that the premise that we're going to agree on is that everybody has an equal opinion or something would be idiotic. The fact that people should have some sort of fair right to argue an opinion, okay, that you could agree on. But what's the point of, you can't, I mean, you're going to negate the function of the debate or the interaction if you're not going to agree that premises are going to have to be established. You know, that's just the way it is. And if the two sides can't agree that, you know, suffering sucks and that not suffering doesn't suck, yeah, you know, you really can't go anywhere. So yeah, I mean, if you can't agree on that premise, why would I even have the conversation? I mean, it seems like it's sort of fruitless if that can't, even that minor victory can't be won. Then yeah, why would I talk about anything else down the road? I mean, you have to get past the first hurdles. So if people aren't going to agree that the real commodity is a state of mind that we're playing for, and you know, it's going to be hard to have a conversation that matters, and it's going to be hard to invest any energy in a conversation where you know, you're going to have to invest so much time. I mean, essentially, you're going to have so deep a conversation to get to realization of the simple premise that you won't even need to have the after conversation, because you had to get so deep just to get to the first step. It's like getting somebody out of their religion. It's almost like you have to teach them some biology, or you have to teach them some science, or you have to, you know, you're almost obligated to do an extensive amount of work to get somebody out of some unyielding, dogmatic position that something else is real when it's not real. I mean, it takes a lot of work to disprove a made up fantasy conviction. And I guess I would argue that the cliche convictions of the standard operating procedure human, you know, life is good, humans are spiritual, you know, some sort of crap that they run on, that there's function innately. You don't have to prove it or demonstrate it. I mean, yeah, you got to do a lot of philosophical work to get people out of that nonsense. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's whatever. I didn't mean to get on that, because it's all kind of inane, procedural, blibble blabble, and what it all comes down to is you're either going to persuade somebody or not persuading somebody. In the end, that's all there is. There's just persuasion, whether you use propaganda or whether you use clear, crisp, clean logic. In the end, it just doesn't matter. The idea is to persuade somebody so they understand. I mean, part of, like I said, part of persuasion is just getting the bad ideas out of people's heads. I mean, that's maybe 90% of the game, is getting the garbage out. Logic in isn't too tough once you get garbage out. Yeah, anyway. I mean, it's one way of looking at it. It's the way I've chosen to look at it for this particular moment in time and space. Yeah. So anyway, this is so discouraging. So very, very discouraging.